On the factory floor, a worker stands perilously close to a river of molten metal. He monitors the flow, unaware of the impending disaster. Suddenly, a leak triggers a catastrophic explosion. A blinding white flash engulfs him completely. As the camera recovers, he emerges from the inferno, a human torch stumbling frantically through the darkness. A construction site in disarray. The camera settles on a worker in a safety vest, lying completely still, face down in the gravel. The air is thick with unspoken horror. As the seconds stretch into an eternity, he doesn't move. Every passing moment confirms the worst fear. A devastating accident has just occurred, leaving a life hanging precariously in the balance. On a remote tropical road, a motorcyclist carrying a passenger pulls up behind a massive grader, vanishing into its blind spot. The operator, completely unaware, suddenly stops and shifts into reverse. In a horrifying instant, the giant wheels begin to roll backward, sealing a tragic fate for the two people trapped directly in their path. On a concrete driveway, a man steps in to guide a heavy metal ramp being lifted by an excavator. It's a fatal miscalculation. As the machine swings, the ramp's unsecured end whips around with terrifying speed. It becomes a steel battering ram, smashing into his head and throwing him to the ground, motionless. A routine job turns into a nightmare in a split second. Deep inside an unstable excavation, two men hammer at the earth, oblivious to the tons of soil looming above. The vibrations from their tools weaken the unsupported walls, threatening to trigger a deadly collapse. With no shoring and no escape route, this isn't just a work site. It's a grave waiting to be filled. Every second could be their last. An industrial facility turns into a war zone. Tragically, a worker is spotted being hurled through the air by an immense force. A secondary explosion rips the tank's entire multi-ton lid off, launching it skyward like a missile. It then crashes back down onto the structure, unleashing a violent final geyser of superheated vapor and shrapnel. At an urban demolition site, spectators film the collapse, believing they're at a safe distance. But as the structure falls, their excited shouts turn to panic. An unstoppable tidal wave of dust and debris explodes from the impact, an impenetrable wall swallowing the landscape and hurtling directly toward their window. They scramble to seal themselves off from the suffocating cloud. Inside the steel mill, a worker watches the glowing spill, dangerously transfixed. In an instant, a catastrophic explosion. A massive wave of molten metal erupts in a blinding flash, surging across the floor and engulfing him completely. He stumbles out of the inferno, a human torch running in agony as his world burns around him. On an automated factory floor, a worker walks directly into a robot's active zone. He bends over the conveyor, oblivious to the swinging arm carrying a heavy metal die. In a horrific, programmed motion, the arm brings the die down onto his head, forcefully crushing him against the belt with unstoppable mechanical force as its cycle completes. In this industrial yard, a worker stands completely motionless. He's just feet from a colossal, churning pile of writhing pink flesh. The seething mound is a living abyss, and one wrong step, one single slip, means being instantly consumed by the ceaseless roiling horror. In a vast shipyard, a worker in an orange vest stands below a massive hull section, completely unsuspecting. Suddenly, a colossal steel plate detaches from above, pivoting down with terrifying speed. It crashes onto the deck, striking the man with brutal, unstoppable force and slamming him to the ground in a direct, bone-jarring impact. Deep within a grimy industrial complex, a worker leans in close to a high-pressure pipe, performing what seems to be routine maintenance. His colleague stands by, watching. In an instant, the junction erupts. A catastrophic violent blast of superheated steam engulfs both men, obscuring the entire scene in a blinding, scalding cloud from which there is no visible escape. Late night at a loading dock, a worker makes a critical miscalculation while standing on the conveyor itself. As he lifts a heavy bag, the weight shifts and he loses his balance, stumbling onto the active belt. There's no time to react. The powerful machine shows no mercy, immediately dragging him headfirst and pulling his entire body down into the machinery below, completely out of sight. Inside an industrial factory, a worker completes a press cycle and leans back into the machine's opening to handle the object. He's bent over the press bed, completely vulnerable. Without warning, the massive upper plate catastrophically fails, slamming down with unimaginable force. In a fraction of a second, the machine becomes a tomb, crushing him instantly. On a factory floor, a worker leans over a powerful industrial machine, guiding material into its massive roller. In a horrifying instant, the machine snags him. He is violently yanked from his perch, flipped upside down, and wrapped around the spinning cylinder. His body becomes a blur, his limbs flailing wildly against the immense, unstoppable centrifugal force. High on a sagging concrete structure, a worker in a red shirt loses his balance, sliding down a sharply tilting beam. In an instant, the catastrophic failure accelerates. The entire floor gives way, plunging him and his colleagues into a violent, chaotic cascade of concrete and steel, swallowing them whole as they are buried under tons of rubble. Inside this industrial foundry, workers are completely unaware of the imminent catastrophe. Without warning, the furnace detonates in a terrifying fireball. The superheated blast wave instantly engulfs a multi-ton forklift, violently launching the massive vehicle backwards through the air as if it were a toy, consumed by the raging inferno. In a dimly lit factory, a worker crouches, focused on his task, oblivious to the dormant machine beside him. Suddenly, without warning, the robotic arm activates. It swings at terrifying speed, striking the man and pinning him against the steel frame. At the moment of impact, a catastrophic fireball erupts, instantly engulfing the trapped worker in a horrifying inferno. In a cluttered industrial workshop, a worker leans perilously close to a massive rotating shaft. In one horrific instant, his clothing is snagged. The machine's unforgiving torque pulls him in, violently wrapping his entire body around the spinning steel. He becomes a blur of brutal, helpless motion, a life caught in a mechanical nightmare. On this factory floor, a worker walks toward a massive, unenclosed industrial fan. He strays too close. In a horrifying instant, the machine's immense suction force rips him from his feet. He is pulled directly into the spinning blades, his body obliterated in a fraction of a second as a dark spray erupts from the fan's unforgiving maw. In a factory, a worker tends to a massive spool of metal wire. Suddenly, the machine lurches to life at terrifying speed. He's caught, dragged from his feet instantly. In a horrifying blur, his body is violently wrapped around the spinning drum, becoming indistinguishable from the unforgiving, coiling metal. Inside a massive sorting facility, a worker steps onto a conveyor belt. He bends over, but suddenly loses his balance and collapses face first. His body goes limp, getting caught at the unforgiving junction between two belt sections. He lies motionless as his colleagues see the horrific fall and begin to rush in. A routine workday instantly turned into a desperate emergency. On the factory floor, a worker interacts with the machinery inside the safety cage. In a horrifying instant, the massive red arm begins its cycle, swinging clockwise at incredible speed. The impact is catastrophic, a brutal, high-force strike to the man's head and upper body, throwing him violently backwards and down, out of sight in a split-second collision with automated force. In a vast industrial workshop, two welders are focused on a large metal tank, oblivious to the immense pressure building within. In a blinding flash, a catastrophic explosion erupts. The massive tank is instantly shredded, and the entire room is violently consumed by the devastating blast, leaving nothing but smoke and utter destruction. At a crowded playground, the operator leans over the still-smoking machine, scraping its interior. He gets perilously close, unaware of the immense pressure building within. Suddenly, a catastrophic secondary explosion erupts with terrifying force, instantly swallowing him whole in a massive, violent cloud of smoke. Inside the factory, a worker steps onto the moving gantry. One wrong move. He stumbles, falling forward onto the grate. In a horrific instant, the massive yellow beam slides over him, pinning him completely beneath its immense weight. Motionless, unseen. Just meters away, his oblivious colleagues continue their conversation, unaware of the tragedy unfolding right beside them. In the gloom of a late-night workshop, a lone worker is totally absorbed in his task, unaware of the approaching danger. From the darkness, a shadowy figure emerges, moving with silent purpose. The worker never looks up as the stranger creeps past, just inches from his back, before melting back into the shadows. He was never aware of how close he came to the unknown. At a loading dock, two men struggle with a massive, top-heavy load. As it becomes unstable and starts to teeter, one worker desperately tries to fight its momentum, but he loses his balance, stumbling backward as the object's immense weight becomes unstoppable. crashing down and completely crushing the back of the van just inches from where another person was standing.